So, lecturer, can you see the slide now?
Yes, I can see. You can start now.
Yes. So, good evening, lecturer, and good evening, everyone. We're from group number 2, and we're going to give a presentations on chapter 1, which is global prospect and policies. Continue from group 1. So, moving on to contents. Um, so, may I ask everyone, can you see the slide moving, or is it just me?
No.
Vanessa, we'll share the screen instead. So can everyone see the slide now?
Yes.
We're going to give a presentations on chapter 1, global prospect and policy. So here's our content. We're going to cover on Taylor policy, also scenario box 1.1 and box 1.2, and last but not least is special feature talking about community market development and forecast. So for the first point, which is tailor policy to the stages of the pandemic and recovery. So tailor policy means that the policy that are tailored to fit country circumstances, because different country are in different phases of the pandemic and also the recovery. Therefore, the policy needs to be tailored. In this, also policy are separated into phases. One is immediate action. Second, initiative to secure the recovery. Third, measure for building a more resilient, inclusive, and environmentally sustainable economy for the post-COVID-19 world. And moving on to phase 1, talking about escaping the crisis. So in this point, what should policymaker and also government focus on in their immediate action? First is healthcare spending. So healthcare spending should be prioritized in this crisis. And then second, fiscal policy support. It should be well targeted and also well adjusted. Third, monetary accommodation. It is added by monetary accommodations wherever possible. Last is macroprudential policy. It is a policy to ensure the stability of the financial system. Also, moving on to the phase 2, which is safeguarding the recovery. So, in this, what should policymaker and also the government safeguard their recovery in their country? Um, in this point, we have policy should address persistent economic scarring or long-term economic scarring. First is failure of firms, and second, labor market policy. Third is human capital, and last is broader fiscal policy. Um, so the second point of the phase 2, safeguarding the recovery, is without sacrificing efficiency. First is zombie firms. So in this, meaning that as firms fall into debt and they are more likely to file the bankruptcy. As you can see in the line graph, the great lockdown in 2020 was unlike during the global financial crisis and other past recessions because corporate bankruptcy have declined across advanced economies. Second is sectoral reallocation. In here, meaning that the policymaker or also the government should focus on the hardest hit sector, for example, the services sector, because it has experienced a much more service slowdown than other parts of the economy. And last is the crisis hit smaller firms the hardest. As a result, policies to promote competitions and limit market concentration should be enhanced to guard against sharp increases in monopoly power during the recovery. So I would like to give the floor to Tony.
I see. Good evening, ladies and everyone. I will carry on. And now we move on to the phase three, which is investing in the futures. So there are many issues that happen in this temporary world. Foremost among these are the ongoing climate crisis, reform to policy frameworks, and improve international policy cooperations. We all know that international policy cooperation is still remaining central. So government should work together to address the global crisis, and by doing so, like continue access to liquidity can prevent external funding pressures from spilling over across the countries, and even can expand monetary policy space. And also, there are some support from the IMF and World Banks in order to provide toolkit to make that better. May I have the next slide, please? About boosting productivities and growth. Like even before the pandemic, productivity growth and had been struggling for several decades. And to solve these issues, it requires corrective policy like improvements in broadband network, chips access to telecommunications, and also like worker retrainings and investment in digital literacies. Like more broadly, that it is would have widened access to emerging job opportunity for them. And moreover, improved framework can also generate policy space. In here, we are focusing on three main policy. First, consider preemptive debt restructurings that include interest rate reductions, principal reductions, and many more. Second, fiscal space like can be generated through measures that not only raise revenues but also improve progressivity. And lastly, monetary policy frameworks like unconventional policies, including asset purchases and forward guidance. And it also can provide a scope to expand policy space as well. And may I have the next slide? On the other hand, without global operations, climate change will continue to hamper economic growth. As we can see the graph that I put on the slides, global emissions like were 4% lower in 2020 compared to 2019. It is lower because it hit by the pandemic. It's not lower by itself. So it is a good sign, but we need to reduce it up to 80% by 2050. And without coordinated global policy actions, the country with the less capacity to absorb the cost of adaptations, like small states or low-income country, will suffer. So here we should rely on this policy. May I have the next slide? Here, the three policy that I would like to put here. First, carbon pricing. Higher price carbon are essential to discourage use of most social costly fuels. And second, green infrastructure investment. Green infrastructure can push like could offset the economic losses from higher energy costs. And the last one is subsidy for green research. Subsidy for research in green technology have potential to speed the shift zero carbon economic dramatically. And given the small size of green technology sector, that it made the price cheap. So that is all about the phase three. Let's move on to the next printer.
So this part is about scenario box. So in the October 2020 WHO, so there was the uncertainty regarding the approval and available of vaccine, as well as the magnitude of the deviation in the scenario. And to illustrate this, the G20 model is used to estimate the impacts of the impacts of pandemic due to the new variant, the efficiency of vaccine, and the impacts of vaccine rollout. Move to next slide. So there are two scenarios. The upside scenario explores the potential of the recovery of the rollout of vaccine that allow activity in sector to boost the confidence. Well as the downside scenario explores that vaccine rollout does not go as smoothly as the plan, and the variant are more resistant to vaccines. Next slide. So in the upside scenario, it assumes the vaccine rollout happen about 10% faster than the baseline, and it effective in preventing infection from the growing range of variant. And in the global GDP growth, it grows faster than in the baseline by just half percent point in 2021, and it go almost 1% in 2022, and it even goes sharply in 2023 that are close to baseline. While as the growth in the AE is roughly half percent point in the 2021, accelerate to 1% in the 2022. And in the growth in EMDE is roughly about 1.4% point in the 2021, and it won't go to accelerate to 3-4% in the baseline in 2022. Next slide. So the downside scenario, it assumes the supply of the production and a logistical problem delivering the vaccine. It allowed the variant to become well entrenched, and yes, it could lower firms the future income and damaging the consumers. So the growth of the global GDP grows slow by roughly half percent point than in the baseline 2021, and it go down to 1% point below the baseline 2022, and it even go midly above the baseline 2023, while as the growth in AE and EMDE is at the same degree in 2021. However, there is the sharper in financial condition for the business in the EMDE, so it means that the growth suffer more than the AE in 2022, and that's all for my point.
Good evening, lecturer and everyone. This part I will deliver you about the part 1.1, which is talk about the global manufacturing V-shaped recovery. The global manufacturing that contracted in the spring of 2020, but it was a short life or only a short period of time with a synchronized V-shaped recovery across both advanced and emerging market economy. In the second half of the year, as we can see in the figure 1.1.1. So we can see that while the rebound reflect in part the resumption of production follow the shutdown, other demand relative factor have also played a role, including the demand for product to facilitate work from home, protective equipment, and so on. So for instance, in April 2020, the demand for motor vehicles dropped rapidly, while the demand for electronic product increased in order to facilitate the work from home. May I have next slide, please? So, however, in the third quarter of 2020, customer spending on durable like car and electronic appliance has raised in advanced economic around 12%, reflecting the policy support program, pent-up demand, and limit spending on service as a result of pandemic. For example, the global car sales were increased on December 2020 after the falling by more than 40% on April. This bounce back also likely reflect to a desire to remain to maintain safe distance and avoid public transportation, as well as purchase incentive program. Moreover, the pandemic has also increased demand for some products. As I mentioned earlier, those products include electronic to accommodate the shift toward teleworking and virtual learning, as well as the plastic, rubber, and textile as the main source of personal protective equipment for the pandemic. Moreover, the lingering uncertainty around the pandemic outlook has hindered the recovery of private sector as well, particularly in equipment, because it has a limit rebound in the production of machinery and other capital goods, since the output in this sector remain only 6% below the pre-pandemic level. Next slide, please. In addition, in near-term outlook for the global manufacturing remain positive, but the near-term recovery could be impacted by the resurgence of a new variant of COVID-19 case in several major economy in the late 2020 and 2021, mostly in the Europe and the United Kingdom, which is lead to the limit impact on the manufacturing activity. Beyond the near term, the widespread availability of vaccine and normalization of contract intensive activity, together with continued policy support this should help fuel the manufacturing recovery. However, still have several factors specified to COVID-19 recession could limit the upside of this recovery. For example, like the global demand will likely to shift from durable to service, and the inventory restocking is likely to be slow in this time because of the lingering uncertainty around the pandemic outlook. So this is the end of the block 1.1. I would like to give the floor to the next presenter.
Thank you, Risa, for giving me the floor. So here's about 1.2, which talk about the who suffer most from the climate change. So in this part, let's look to the figure 1.2.1. We can see that the country that mostly got affected from the natural disaster, such as the climate change or the earthquake, are mostly the country that has the low income economy or small island economy. And in addition, regarding to this chart box, the economy of those countries has got the massive attack from the natural disaster, which it impact lead to the which it leads to a decline in the real GDP per capita of those country by 1.2%. And next slide, please. And furthermore, if we narrow down into the fraction of the country in more detail, we can see that the natural disaster has aggressively impact to the public infrastructure, living standards of people, economic activity in the public infrastructure. We can see that the natural disaster has destroyed the necessary structure of the country, such as the water and electricity supply system, transportation structure, and so forth. And next, if we look at to the living standard of the people, we can see that this disaster affects mostly to the poorest segments of the population, such as the people health uh, is damaged, like the living is their living is destroyed or declined, and also the children are like prevent from attending the school. And if we look at to the economic activity, we can see that it has a negative impacts on the consumption, production, and overall welfare of the country. And however, we have three points strategy that we can address this problem. First of all, building structural resilience. It means that we need to invest more in the buildings, the disaster-proof infrastructure, earlier warming system, stricter enforcement of the building code and zoning rule, and so forth. And next, the building financial resilience. In this regard, we need to ensure that we can access to the pre-approved contingents, credit lines, and also provides the budget for the financial buffer, and also have a better measurements and greater broadcast about the exposures and vulnerability to the climate hazard. And the last one is the building social resilience. In this point, we need to enhance the disaster preparedness and also management the capacity in order to limit the uh, negative impacts of the uh, that we got from the natural disaster, and also strengthens the existing social protection system to limit the impacts on the most vulnerable, and also improve the timeliness and scope of the international assistance. So that's all for my part. Let's move to the next part.
Good evening, lecturer, and good evening, everyone. So now let's move on to my part, which is talk about the special feature of commodity market developments and forecast. So the IMF primary commodity price index increased by 29% between August 2020 and February 2021. That led by energy commodity, especially for petroleum products. And its part also analyzes about the food security. And so moving on to the next slide. And so for the oil market rebalance continues while natural gas prices show seasonal volatility. First, we look at the oil market. So for the oil prices increased by 39% between August 2020 and February 2021 because an increase of COVID-19 cases and the difficulty in vaccine rollout at the beginning of the year lead to the decrease the oil demand outlook and lead the OPEC and the OPEC partner countries coalition to review more prudently the relaxation of the 7 million barrels a day production curve. That's in an attempt to prop up the price and reduce oversupply. And for the future market, oil's price are expected to fall from $58.5 a barrel in 2020 to $50.7 in 2025. And for the natural gas price, shows strong weather-induced seasonal volatility, with Asian liquefied natural gas price increase to almost $40 per BTU or per million British thermal units, while U.S. Henry Hub spot price reached $17.5 per PTU due to the cold snap crippled shale gas output in Texas that led to the strong electricity demand in the mid-February. Next slide, please. And for this part, the base metal price rely on the stronger recovery in industrial production. The base metal price increased by 30% by 30% between August 2020 and February 2021 due to the strong demand for electric vehicles, and the precious metal price such as gold or silver decreased by 6% after reaching highs in August 2020 as the demand for self-assets faded. And for the IMF base metal price index is projected to increase by 32.1% in 2021 and decrease by 4.5% in 2022. And for the precious metal price are expected to increase by 6% in 2021 and by 0.4% in 2022. Next slide, please. And moving on to the next part is talk about the disappointing crops and precautionary stockpiling sent food price higher. And so in this part, the IMF food and beverage price index increased by 20%, led by vegetable oils and cereals. And for the second half of 2020, we can see the increase in price of many staple crops, including soybean and corn, that increased by more than 50% due to the weather than expected harvest, and the wheat increased by 38% following dry winter wheat condition across the US grape plants and strong stockpiling demand. And next slide, please. And for this part, the food security collateral damage of the pandemic. So for the food security have been important across human history, not only the impact on people's health, but also catalyzing on by political change and triggering conflict. For instance, the First World Food Crisis between 1972 and 1975, and also the anti-government protests that spread across the Middle East and North Africa due to the increase of global food prices in 2000s. And additionally, food security also affect on economic development. For instance, the undernourishment that can have negative impact on physical and cognitive development, limiting educational attainment and lifetime earning potential. And for the ongoing global health crisis by leading to dramatic fall in incomes has raised serious concern about access to food in some region and for some segment of the population. And this is the end of my part. Let's move on to my other teammate.
Thank you, Chita, for the presentation, and good evening, teacher, and evening, everyone. So I'm going to continue Chita's part, which is about the food insecurity. So my part, we're going to I'm going to give a definition of what is food insecurity. So this definition is according from the UN. Food security occurs if all people of all time have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meet their preference. So the special feature on food security focuses on two dimensions, which is one, caloric intake, which Chita had already mentioned about the under nourishment, which means the lack of food consumption. And the second dimension is their composition, which is the cellular contribution to the overall caloric intake and protein supply. So next slide, please. So now we move to the business cycle determinants of food insecurity. So talking about the determinants of food insecurity, there are four factors to explain the undernourishment. So the first factor is the GDP per capita growth, which to capture the household income. The second factor is the food price inflation that captures food supplies and external factors. And external factor I will be talking soon. The third uh, the third factor is the initial condition, and the fourth factor is the social transfer, which means the government policy aim to protect the vulnerable segment of population. So based on this cycle, the business cycle determinants of food insecurity, the study also shows that the GDP growth is the most important driver of the fluctuation in undernourishment, which means that 1% increase in GDP growth um, will lead to the decrease of undernourishment by 0.95%. So I just want to re-mention it that undernourishment means the lack of food consumption. So when the GDP growth increase, the lack of food consumption will decrease. The second one would the second point the studies show is that food price inflation is also relevant as well. As you can see in the graph, so the 2 percentage point increase in food price inflation will lead to the increase of undernourishment by 0.24%. So food price inflation is relevant to the countries which GDP per capita in between $10,000 to $20,000 based on 2017 purchasing power dollar. The study also shows that the social protection is also a valuable shield against income and food price shocks because it helps to decrease the effect for the given level of economic development. And social transfer, which means the government intervention, has a direct positive effect in reducing undernourishment. And finally, as the diet composition, when income decrease, households started to move their regular meal to the cheaper one. So this is just how show how the income can affect or make change to the diet composition. Next slide, please. So now we move to the determinants of food inflation. So in order to study the determinants of food inflation, this paper uses 121 countries to study. So the economic results show that the annual pass-through from international food price to domestic food consumer price index or CPI is about 0.26 for middle and low-income countries and 0.14 for high-income countries. The transmission of international food price variation across border is limited by some external factors. So the external factors is including tax, subsidies, price control, and so on. However, even though the external factors are relevant, food production is mostly consumed domestically. So in fact, domestic food shock are an important driver of food price inflation. Moreover, okay, moreover, countries with small area tend to experience larger shock. A typical domestic food production shock also increased food inflation by 0.3%, as you can see in the table. And the same shock on a regional scale increased food inflation by 0.7 percentage point. However, food trade can improve welfare based on a simple observation. Actually, they said that domestic food production shock have a low correlation with those in other countries and especially with global food production shocks. So by this, they just want to encourage to boost or to promote more international food trade to go beyond the regional level to the global level. And next slide, please. Yes, so now we move to the conclusion. So the conclusion here, I will wrap up about the food supply, the food insecurity. So income is the most important driver of food insecurity, and because of the impacts of of COVID-19, the 2020 decline in income and the absence of policy intervention, um, it increased in and the increase in food price. It leads to a 62 million and 4 million increase in the number of hungry people. Moreover, international food markets should be kept open, and food exporters should avoid export restrictions that excel, um, that make the global price impact of food production shock in the international food markets occur. And finally, government should take alternative measures as well. The measure that could stimulate strategic food reserves at the regional level, and they also encourage the development of adaptation for more climate resilient crops and production method as well in order um, to ensure the food reserve. So this is end of our presentation. But before moving to the Q&A session, I would like to give you guys a quick look at our discussing question. Next slide, please. Yes, so here is our discussion question. So I would like to ask, in your opinion, do you think that closed border policy is good or not for the economy, and why or why not? We choose this question because we want the all of you guys to engage more in answering the question. So if you have any questions, you can ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Group 2, for the comprehensive presentations. Of course, the presentation touched on the box study, which is quite a little bit more advanced, since they use method, okay, that for doing the research and they draw conclusion, which is sometimes it's high event. But anyway, the group have managed to come up with a very easily understandable presentation. So that's a good presentation. I think I have a few question and comment for our presenter before we move to the discussion question. First, I'd like to go to Sena. I saw in your part of presentation you talk about the market concentrations, and you say that there should be a limit for the market concentrations. Can you explain a little bit what is the market concentration and why do we have to limit the market concentration?
So thanks, Luke, for the question. About the market concentrations is like during the crisis, like the market, I mean the government should focus for on the smaller firms too, because smaller firm is also hit the hardest, and it is to avoid that the policymaker to make a policy that to promote competition and also to limit market concentration. In here, meaning that it's related to like monopoly power, yeah, it make it concentrations like I can't really find the word, but it means that the market shouldn't focus on only like big firms or yeah, only monopoly power, but also to things about like the smaller firms too, and also to promote competitions again. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sena, for clarification. Okay, that's right. Market concentration, I mean the monopoly and generally referring to big firm. Next, I have a question for Tony. In Tony part, he talked about the external funding pressures. So could you explain a little bit on this? What is the external funding pressure?
I go with the successfully. It's just like interest rate of our currency. So when the I mean the external funding that uh, support to our country is not make our money lower, and it will not make this to spill over the countries. That's what I understand.
I think here it's more likely about depending on the funding from
Yes,
outside the country, and most likely is about borrowings. When
yes.
when you don't have enough cash or money, especially during the COVID-19, where the government need to spend a lot, okay, for the social assistance program and for recovery. So the fact that the country have shortage of cash, it may put them a lot of external funding pressures. So with the cooperations with other country, maybe it could ease, okay, it could lower this kind of external funding pressures. Okay. Anyway, thank you, Tony. And I like to move to Senasa. It's not a question, but can you move to the part? The slide, the one you have the I mean the chart diagram. I think in 13, slide 13. Yes. Well, this is the one of the good practice when you supposed to do some projection or forecast. So you see in the report, in the future, if you likely, if you are asked to do the projections or forecast, it's better to have such like scenario. Okay. So in this report, they have two kind of scenario, the upside scenario and the downside. Okay, so I think this is quite a very good lesson we can learn from the report. If in the future you're supposed to do, you can have a scenario that is too bad, okay, which can make economy grow, or even don't have any growth at all. Or you can have a very good scenario, okay, or you can have a medium. So it may not limit to only two scenario, okay. So this is just a remark, okay. So it's good, okay. So you can note this thing, okay. In any kind of projection, it's better to have that kind of scenario. The next is for Seiha, right? Seiha talk about the impact of climate change, especially on the disaster, and one of the conclusion, it seems like the impact of this climate change fall more. Yes, that's right. It seems like fall more on low-income economy, right, and the small islands than for the advanced economy. Okay, so could you explain the reason why do the low-income economy and the small island tend to be more negatively impacted by this kind of the natural disaster or the thing?
I think that because those country doesn't have enough financial support, and also the buildings that creates to eliminate the effects of the natural disaster, because those countries mostly have a small GDP growth compared to another country. Yes, lecture.
Yeah, somehow you also mentioned that the point related to this, but generally when we're looking in low-income economy, take our country as an example, our economy tend to depend much on the natural resource as a way to generate income. Think about our agriculture. You can see, so it's easily to be, if we depend a lot, if we depending a lot on natures to create income for the economy, we're also more likely to be affected when this natural disaster or climate change actually happening. If we do farming based on the weather natures, and when it's climate change, which the rainfall season become unpredictable, okay, you can have droughts, and so we likely to be the low-income economy, okay, likely to be extremely affected by this kind of natural disaster. Small island country generally depend much on natural resource. You can see country like in the Pacific Islands, like small one, okay. They likely to depending on fishing industry, okay. They don't have agriculture, or some even only depending on tourists, like Maldives, for example. what happens if you have a COVID-19 and or disaster hit? So you easily be negatively affected, okay, by this kind of because your economy is not diversified enough. You're depending on a single source or a few source for generally the source depending on nature. Okay, so that is good. Another point I see in your presentation, Sengha, is you talk about social resilience, right? I'm not so clear what is the social resilience here.
Regarding to this point, it means that we need to enhance and promotes the disaster preparedness, and also we manage over the uh, capacity that we can uh, limit or reduce uh, the negative effect from the natural disaster, and also we can uh, by strengthening the existing the social protection system, and also uh, social protection system that uh, limits the impacts on the uh, vulnerable people, and also like uh, find uh, find the international assistance to support or recover the country.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you, Sengha, for clarification. I got it. Lastly, I have a question for Chimei. Chimei, I saw in your part you talk about the food price and many driver for the food price, right? Then I saw that you mentioned that the income was the main source leading to, food insecurity, right? I think you have slide 26. Yeah. I can see in the figure 1.SF5, I can see that it's true that income would have negative. The fact that decline in the income could lead people to have more food undernourishment, okay, to about almost 1%. So it negatively affects the. But I'm not. I agree with the food inflation. When the price of food become more expensive, it would affect people who are poor, cannot afford to buy food. And also social space have positive impact for negative impact for reducing the food insecurity. I'm not quite sure about convergence. What is that? The convergence that appear in this figure. Do you have any explanation for the term?
Teacher, actually, there are two terms that they did not explain in the book. The first one is initial condition, and the second one is convergence. I'm not even sure like what are they different, related or not, but the other 3 points like income, food inflation, and social transport, they did explain it, teacher.
Okay. Well, I'm not. Also, I don't. It could be mean many things in convergence. Converge means something maybe converge together. It could be maybe the income gap in a country converge. The rich and the poor would not so difference. So it means that the poor can have more income and rich, so they converge to one another. Or perhaps, and this could may lead to the ability for people to pay for the food and to reduce the food insecurity. Okay, and also, but conversion could mean something that catch up. Okay, the two part try to move to a single point. Okay, or it could be between rural
Yes,
and
teacher.
urban area. They may have access to food. Okay, just a quick note. And another thing I saw in your part is about the pass-through of international price. Well, that's quite one of the debate. It's true for many developing countries. we depending on the food that is imported from other countries, and when the price of that imported food become expensive, it would have severe impact on domestic price, and it could lead to the food insecurity in the countries. That's all my impressions. Anyway, I think the group have done a good job. They managed to come over all the technical. Okay, I think we can move to the discussions. Can you show your discussion questions? Okay, so this is the question from the group. So would you have anything, people in the class, you want the group to clarify any keyword, or perhaps the question is not understand? You can ask now. Okay, hello everyone. Anything you need clarification from a group regarding the discussion questions? For example, closed border, what is that thing? So you understand, right? For all the questions. Okay. So I think what the group is trying to ask perhaps is trying to say that what happens if you try to prevent or you put barrier, okay, on the flow of the goods, okay, from other country into your economy. Would you think that is a good thing or not? Okay, if you think it's a good thing, why? If you think it's not, why? If you don't have anything you need clarification, I'd like to split you into breakout rooms in order to discuss these questions. And you have 10 minutes for discussions. I will try to get our presenter into each room to help coordinate the discussions. So we have, let me see how many people. We have 34, so I like to put you in 5 rooms. Okay. Just wait a minute. I'm trying to put you into rooms and try to allocate our presenter to support you in the discussions. I think room 1, I have Sengha there. It's okay. Room 2, I have oh, we don't have people in room 2. I will get Zainab to room 2. Zainab, okay. Wait a minute. Get to room 2. Okay. And in room 4, I have why room 4 is empty? Just wait a minute, okay. The new tool of the breakout room in team so complicated. Okay, in room 1 I have yeah. Room 2 I have Misal, okay. Room 3 I have not yet in room 3. Room 4. Room 4 have Chimay, okay. Room 5. I'm saying okay. So I can open the room now. You have 10 minutes, okay, for the discussion, and then I will bring you back to the room for sharing your discussion result.
Hello.
Wait, xin là sao? Cù thì cho bật tay.
No វាកំពុង discuss you call me មែនមេកំពុង moderate នៅក្នុង order room
Oh, I don't know, sorry.
Yes okay មីទៅវិញញ៉ា
ហ្នឹងហើយណាហើយមីចង់ទៅដែរធ្វើម៉េច
មីអត់ដឹងដែរតមី
Okay, go.
បើហើយមីត invite បើហើយមី invite យើងជប់
Yeah,
ចាំ
sẽ
មីសា
invite មកហ្នឹងហើយ Excuse me, teacher. Teacher. Hello, teacher. Teacher. Oh my god. Teacher. Teacher, could you hear me? Teacher. Hello, teacher. Could you hear me? Excuse me, teacher. Could you add me in group chat? Thank you, teacher.
Okay, hello back everyone. Sorry for bring you back to the main room. Uh, I hope you enjoy your discussion. So let me invite each room to share the discussion result. Um, let me share the whiteboard. You can make use of the whiteboard if you need to write something. Just wait a minute. Okay, so let's begin by invite people in room one. Room one, we have Liang An, Wari, Richard, Saipik, Samnang, and Sina. Okay, so please, can you share your discussion?
Yes, lecturer. So I'm Bari from room one. So after around 10 or 15 minutes of discussion, we have concluded an overall of four main points regarding the closed border policy. So the three main points do not support closed border policy because it is not good for the economy. So first of all, if we implement closed border policy, the country that implement closed border policy would not be able to achieve what so-called specialization from trade. So since one particular country cannot produce everything on their own, as they have a limited resource, so therefore it is really logical to conduct trade with other country. So if we implement closed border policy, it means that we do not accept both import and export with other countries, and therefore we cannot achieve specialization. The second point is that closed border policy really harms or damage the country economy, especially in COVID-19 crisis, because for instance, like developed country that implement closed border policy would actually harm emerging market and developing country, as developing country, most country tend to rely on export, tend to rely on trade to make their economy flourish. For instance, with export and trade, there will be productions, and if there are productions, then the employment rate will be stable. Right? The people in that country will continue to have jobs to do. So if developed country tend to implement closed border policy, then developing country would face the obstacle of exporting product since they no longer accepting it. So it will cause massive unemployment for emerging market and developing country itself. And the third point is that spillover effect and technological transfer. So if two countries conduct trade, of course, they will be able to learn from each other. And if one developed country conduct trade with developing country, for sure that developing country would receive like the transfer of technology and as well as spillover effects, which of course very beneficial for their economy. And last but not least, which is one point that support the closed border policy, which is political system. So if a country actually operates under liberal economy, then it is logical to conduct trade. But if some country, for instance, they are implementing like for the sake of arguments, like say if they implemented a planned economy or a socialist or communism system, then closed border policy would be very logical, would be very practical for them. So this is all of our discussion lecture, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, room one, for sharing your room discussion. Let me move to room two. We have Vimin, Davin, Swisa, Udom, Dalia, and Rick. Can you share your room discussion?
Yes, sir. After we discuss, we collectively have two main points to support to say that it is better to open the border because firstly, when we trade with each other, both parties will benefit. So during COVID-19, you still need money in order to survive. And secondly, it makes you have more variety, which means that if you can only plant apple but you want to eat banana, if you close the border, you can only eat the apple. But if you open the border and trade, you can eat banana and eat apple at the same time. So that is all from my room.
Okay, thank you, Udam, for sharing your room discussion. Let me invite room 3. Room 3, we have Thinit, Janvisal, Konita, Sonita, Sidikun, Sucheta, and Tony. Can you share your room discussion, please?
Okay, so from our discussion, we found that just as the previous group said, less variations, less options, meaning that you don't really get to enjoy the goods that you currently enjoy. And this also leads to monopoly in domestic products because there's no competition. And when there's less competition, it also discourages domestic firms and to update their or less innovation. So there's a limit growth in there, and I guess increase in black market activities. And also, as stated from group 1, they also mentioned that the economics thing, that it basically, if you close the border, it's not possible to keep the economy afloat given the pandemic too. So open borders is what it is, and we do not agree with closed borders. That's it from group 3.
Okay, let me invite room 4. We have Chiu Mei, Sum Tây, Sun Hua, Kam Hua, Li Hieng, and Moni. Can you share your room discussion?
Yes, lecturer. So my name is Kim Hor, and I will be the representative of Group 4. Our group, we also believe that the closed border policy would be actually really bad for the global economy, based on 3 reasons. So the first reason is actually related to tourism and services sector. So as we already know that many countries around the world depends on tourism and services sector. They depends on tourists coming into the country and purchase their services. So when we actually raise the closed border policy, this would be restrict the tourists to come inside the country, and there will be no more tourists coming to the country. So that means the services would also cannot gain any benefits from the tourists as well. And this would actually impact it to the global economy as a whole. And how can we actually know whether the tourist sector or the services sector really impact the global economy? We can actually look at the shares of these 2 sectors to the global economy or to the global GDP. So based on my research in 2019, the services sector actually contribute to the global GDP more than 65%. And it's followed by the agriculture and industry sector. And the 2 of them actually below the services sector. And for the tourism sector, it's actually contributed more than 10% of the global GDP in 2019. So we can actually see that these 2 sectors really contribute a lot to the global GDP. And that means by raising this policy, the closed border policy, it would actually restrict the tourists and it would impact to the global economy a lot. And the second one is related to trade discrimination. So back during the COVID-19 pandemic, India actually used to trade meat with other countries. But as you already know that during that time, the COVID-19 cases in India has surged, and many countries around the world, they actually
imposed the closed border policy to India, so they could not actually trade their meat with other country anymore. And when there are less trade activities in the world, it means that the global GDP is also falling down as well. And the last one is related to the price of the products. So as you already know that countries trade with one another, and it's actually making the price of the products going down because there's a lot of competitions going on. But when the country closed the border, there will be no more foreign competitor. So the local producer would actually raise the price of their products and become the monopoly producer inside the country, and it would make the price of the products going really high, and it would also cause the inflation as well. And this actually impact to the global economy. So this is that is all for our group lecture.
Okay, thank you, Kamho, for sharing your room discussions. Let me invite the last room. We have room 5, which have Tida, Nasa, Li Ho, Morkot, Sengha, Danit, and Manirot, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
so,
we can hear you.
We are from Group 5. After having the 10-minute discussions on the topic, our group has seen both good and bad point when it comes to closed border policy. So our group would like to share the good and the bad points. So for the good point is that the closed border policy, it have to protect the domestic products as well as to prevent the fear from the foreign investor as well as the foreign country to their countries. However, we can see that even though it is have to protect as well as have to protect the citizen in the country, we can see that having the closed border policy can make can make those countries to have like less developed, to become less developed country, since they didn't have any products exchange and stuff like import or export. So the country tend to be more slow comparing to the open economy. Also, it is bad because it has less competitive comparing to the open economy. And when it comes to supply chains, the supply chains tend to cut off. It's like when your country produce some things and need the product from another country. However, your country is a closed economy, so your country cannot export or import the product from another country. So the supply chains is gonna cut off. And also, the closed economic country tends to have choice limited, like less good services options. And also, as we can see, our group can see, the closed economy tends to more likely focus on the highly focus on the agriculture instead of technology developments. Yes, so that is all from our group.
Okay, thank you, Danit, for sharing your room discussion. Well, it's very nice to hear all the reason and the argument for most of the cases from our room. It's likely to show that country get more benefit by opening rather than by closing. In practice, it's quite true that most of the country on the world we can see they did opens, but it's not 100% open. There's still industry in which they are likely to protect, okay, in some cases. But more or less, okay, the degree of openness would actually can be up to 90% and different by countries. So we hardly found that any country who being close all the border, okay, and no trade. Even in North Korea, they do trade with China, okay, to for the economy. So it's very difficult to imagine that even an island located in the middle of Pacific Ocean still receive visitor and the tourists. So it's hardly to have a country that close 100% and no trade at all in the today world. Okay, and all the argument you mentioned actually quite right, and it have been supported by research, and it have been confirmed by evidence that closing the country lead to a thing like job loss, loss of competitions, loss of the jobs, technologies, benefits, okay, and many other things like our class has mentioned. I think it's very nice discussion. It's a collections of good ideas about this, so I'm very happy to see this. So I think it's a nice discussion, and since it is time now, I'd like to end the meeting here. And thank you for sharing a good idea. So we'll meet again next week. So have a good evening and enjoy your time with your family. See you again next week. Goodbye.